Hello and welcome to the Geeky Brummie Podcast. We're glad to be back with you. It's me, your host, Mr. Ryan Parrish. Joining me today is Mr. Keith Bloomfield.
Evening all.
Mr. Leigh Frost.
Hello.
And Mr. Matt Lovell.
Hello.
How the devil are we all in this kind of ridiculous British heat wave, which we don't ever get? So it's kind of weird, and we're all hot and sweaty, and it's not nice.
Try spending a whole weekend in this heat watching a video game conference and then recording it at the same time.
Yeah, we apologise for any kind of fan noise in the background, but I think we'd just all be puddles by the end of this if we didn't have them on. So, what have you been all up to? Let's start with you, Leigh, apart from watching video game conferences.
I've actually been playing through Sackboy: A Big Adventure. Finally. It's been sitting on my to play pile for a while, and it's so good. It's just such a lovely little platformer. Definitely probably up there with one of my favorite platformers that I've ever played. So it's kind of, I think the best comparison is something like Super Mario 3D World, where it's 3D environments, but it's kind of very linear and there's a fixed camera angle and it's sort of slightly from above and everything. But it's just some of the imagination on show in that game is astounding. Like it's like every level has its own little gimmick that it's got, and you've got to try and work around that. Like it genuinely feels like something that Nintendo could have put together, but it is a Sony game. And then there's also just the music as well of it. The music licensing budget must have been the biggest part of that game, because it goes to some weird places, because they've got like musical levels where the entire level is built around a music track. So it's a few levels at the start of the game, and as you go in, you hear like the Uptown Funk opening riff just playing on a radio, and I was like, am I hearing that right? And then like you jump into this catapult, and then the catapult fires you on the beat of the song as you go down this slide, and it's still all to the tune of the song, and the song just kicks in as you're on the ramp and everything, and the whole level is bouncing around to the tune of Uptown Funk, and there's different bits and pieces that are synced up to the song, and it's insane. And they do that a few other times. They've got a Bowie level in there. There's a Britney Spears level as well, which threw me when that happened. But there's also like license things so they can rearrange them, because there's like a jungle level, and I was sitting there going, I know this tune. It's like, it sounds like tribal sort of chanting and sort of African instruments and stuff, but you realize that it's Depeche Mode. It's just can't get enough, and I'm like, what did you do? And it happens a few times throughout the game, and it's just like, okay. And then there's like the usual set of like, we've found like weird little indie artists who make songs that sound like they fit with Little Big Planet, and we just kind of put them in the game as well. The Go Team show up again, and Anna Managuchi show up again, and it's just such a, it just adds to this weird, like, fun, imaginative atmosphere of the whole game, and I've just been having a lot of fun with it. So,
do you get the twee British narrator of any?
Sadly, Stephen Fry isn't in this one, like he has been in all the sort of Little Big Planet games. But you do get there's a character called Scarlet who accompanies you throughout the game, and she'll pop up occasionally and offer Sackboy guidance on what he needs to do next. And it's Dawn French.
Brilliant.
I mean, pretty good.
It's a good casting.
Fry,
and the villain is actually Richard E. Grant as well. Apparently his first ever video game role, and it's in Sackboy.
Nice.
It's because they missed out on that licensed game for Withnail and I, where you constantly demand the finest wines.
Yeah,
I keep imagining somebody to remake that for something like the ZX Spectrum or the Commodore 64, a glorious 8-bit version.
See, that's why, because like for the most of the when the villain was talking, I was half expecting him to go like, I've done all this by mistake, I'm sorry. She just gets drowned out by rain.
No, that would be cool. It sounds like a really fun game. I mean, I've not as a non-Sony person, Little Big Planet's kind of passed me by. But they always sound like they're really fun, interactive games, and a bit of a segue from Dreams, which I know you struggled to get to grips with.
Yeah, it's a very difficult game to get to grips with. But I mean, now we've kind of got Little Big Planet in two different parts because of that. Because we've got Sackboy, which is purely a platformer now, doesn't have the create mode. But then you've got Dreams, which is Media Molecule themselves making just the create mode, but it's even more complicated, and that's how it's split now for some reason.
Yeah, I saw somebody made like an entire level of Sonic in
it's
Dreams.
crazy
It's
the
like
stuff you can make
ridiculous
in there. I'd love to like properly sit down and figure it all out, but there's just so much stuff in it. You're allowed so much freedom with it. But...
Cool. Any other exciting adventures of non-Sackboy related?
No, I mean most of what I've been doing is over the past few days, especially, has been E3. So editing that and updating release schedules and things like that, just to keep track of everything.
Yeah, I mean you've got some reaction videos over on your Patreon channel, so if you want to go and check that out, do you want to give us the link?
And also there will be an edited highlight of like sort of the main things, so the big releases and games that caught my attention. It's like an hour and a half of just everything kind of smushed together with some of my general thoughts on the conferences in between as well. So that'll be up by the time this comes out as well.
Cool. So go and check out Bob the Pet Ferret on Patreon and YouTube for that. Matt, how about yourself? How you been the last few weeks?
Yeah, not too bad. Busy, but with the tying in with the British weather, I thought I'd enjoy the sunshine. And last weekend, me and my partner he took me to the Ginny Ring, like just outside Bromsgrove, spontaneously, and it's the most middle class experience I've ever had. For people who aren't sort of local, it's kind of like sort of quaint little villagey type area where there's loads of shops in one enclosed space. So there's shops, there's also a sort of like a pond and a bit of a farm sort of there as well, and you've got like a local brewer, a local chocolatier, a local butcher, a glass blower, then you've got a gift shop with loads of like artsy stuff, and you've got a couple of sort of like workspaces but also turned little shops, so from like artists to woodwork, that kind of thing. It was interesting. I definitely wasn't the demographic for it. I'll say that. But we did the whole experience. We went to the cafe and had a baguette for about 15 quid. Saw and I got fired at by a horse. So overall, it was a great weekend. And I obviously did the other British thing of I went out without wearing sunscreen because I thought it would be fine. It would be absolutely fine. And so by about 5 o'clock, I was looking like a lobster, and I couldn't touch anything, and I couldn't even sit in the car. So that was my trip to Ginny's Ring, just outside Bromsgrove.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I say, I've just about recovered from my suntan. I now have the joy of one arm which is peeling slowly. It looks like I've been a truck driver for about 2 weeks. Where it's just one arm is peeling and the rest of me is fine. But it's just, I keep looking down and it's like, ugh.
It's just horrible because I just kind of like just sit there with your skin peeling, sweaty, like I've gained weight, so all my shirts are sticking to me. I'm just there being like, I just feel like an unattractive slug. It's horrible.
You feel like a human Greg sausage. But yeah, for people overseas who watch this, UK does not have air conditioning. We'll have it in maybe offices and some offices and some shops.
Hotels as well.
At home, hotels. But we don't have it in our home like as a standard thing. And our homes are built for the British weather, which means they're designed to keep rain out and keep the heat in. They're all like small, thick windows, thick walls, and yeah, gets warm in the summer.
But even with sort of office air conditioning, you'll find it's working in the winter. It's polar ice cap tier cold in the winter, and then when the summer comes around, you really want it. It's broken. So we, as a kind of nation, just don't understand weather.
Yeah, as soon as that thermometer gets over about 25 degrees centigrade, Britain pretty much just starts to melt.
Have any of you ever encountered, for a while, there was an architectural thing where people went around saying, we're going to build a building that self-regulates its heating. And I've been in a few, and I don't think it's ever worked in any building I've ever been in, because generally, like you said, every British building is super, super hot in the summer and super, super freezing cold in the winter. And I'm not sure whether like all of these architects are Australian and they've just got it the wrong way round, because they expect the summer to be cold and the winter to be hot, and that's how they've designed it, or whether it's just some snake oil, Emperor's New Clothes, where they've just gone, yeah, we've gone to design this building, it's going to self-regulate, it's great. It's like, no.
I think the only time British people are happy is when it's about 16 to 17 degrees and overcast, which means we can go outside and do what we want, and it's not too cold inside or outside. But we get like 2 weeks of that a year. The rest of the time it's too cold or it's too hot. So that's kind of like we just live for 2 weeks out of 52 of the year.
This is why I insist that like autumn is the best season, because that's when it starts.
Yeah.
You know, it gets cooler, and also you have Halloween, but that's separate to the weather.
So I have a theory about this, and it's about school summer holidays, and we get it ingrained to us that the 6 weeks that we have off for school summer holidays when we grow up is like the best time of our lives. But it's not, because summer is a miserable, miserable season. Spring, autumn, fine. Summer, I hate summer. It's too warm, too hot. Can't do anything. Stay home. And if you do go out, you'll see too many other people around as well, which is not great in a pandemic. Just want a big pokey stick to keep them away.
The only time I've really enjoyed summer like that was like when they used to have Nine Worlds down in London, and I'd just go down to London for a week, even though the actual convention was on like the weekend. I'd just go for the whole week and just like wander around London. And pretty much every time I'd do that, it'd be like sort of towards the end of August, and the weather would get really nice, and that would be great. And of course, I'd be staying in a hotel with air conditioning, so that helped too. But yeah, that's like the only time that I've ever really enjoyed summer.
Yeah, the worst thing about London in the summer is the underground.
Oh yeah,
because it is like the seventh circle of hell when you get down there. You get the awful fart of wind that gets pushed into your face as the tube train comes in. Everybody's hot, everybody's sweaty. It's like 30 degrees down there all the time. And it's just a joyless experience getting the tube in the summer. And it's like the one worst thing about convention season when you do go down to the convention in the summer. It's always at least a half an hour tube ride, because you get into the centre of London and it's always somewhere completely out of the way to go to, like Kew or something like that, to go to a convention. Yeah, British people don't do summer very well. Anything else exciting, Matt?
I mean, in terms of geekiness, I suppose I finished watching the final season of Castlevania on Netflix. Verdict was, I don't know, to be honest. It was equal parts amazing. The amazing bits were amazing, and then the bad bits were bad. So like the art style is still brilliant, and they really when they had the set pieces, it was absolutely fantastic. But the story was a little bit all over the place, I thought, in terms of certain characters they built up, like these journeys, a kind of Game of Thrones situation where they built up all these characters and these journeys, and then some of them just kind of happened. And then, without spoiling it, I think the ending, what they did with some of the characters, I was a bit like, okay. Yeah, so I enjoyed it. I definitely recommend watching it, but it wasn't, I kind of hoped it for more.
Yeah.
I'll be
So
interested.
is that the final season then?
That's the final season. So there is going to be a spin-off, and I think, if my knowledge is correct, I think it's like a prequel, so it follows the Belmonts in their peak. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's not a prequel. It's actually following on.
Is it following on?
So like
the
the original, like what we've seen so far of Castlevania has been based largely off Castlevania 3.
Simon's Quest, isn't it? No, not Simon's Quest.
Dracula's Curse is what I think.
Dracula's Curse, that's it. Yeah.
Because it's got Trevor Belmont and it's got Cypher and it's got Alucard. But now I think the spin-off is going to be Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night, which is set further in the future.
I was going to say, because Simon's Quest was 2?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Which was the really weird one, which wasn't like a Castlevania at all.
It's the one where you pretty much needed a guide to beat.
Yeah.
Because like it doesn't explain anything to you at all.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Nintendo game in the 90s.
And would just interrupt you every so often to just like turn everything dark and say what a horrible night to have a curse.
And you have to read every single sign to make sure you know you're in the right way.
Yep.
I wonder if this final season, though, was affected by the fact that the main writer was a guy called Warren Ellis, who'd done a lot of comics stuff. And I don't know whether it was in between seasons or after the last season was aired, he ran into a bit of trouble for some inappropriate behaviour. So I'm wondering whether that had an impact on that and whether episodes had got ghost written or he just didn't commit to finishing the series correctly. So I wonder if that had an impact on that last season.
Possibly. I mean, don't be wrong. The season is still incredibly enjoyable, and I definitely recommend it. But it was just more a case of it kind of didn't know where it wanted to go, or which stories to focus on, or which characters to focus on. So there were just some that fell flat and that kind of thing. And I think the ending itself was again a little bit. I think it should have ended at a certain point, but then it kept going. And when it ended, actually, when I thought it was going to end, it was quite emotional, and then it carried on. And I think that kind of made me go, "Oh, okay." So yeah.
Yeah, because like with the end of the second season, like it felt like a natural ending.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then what I thought they were going to do is follow what the actual Castlevania series was doing, like the games were doing, which would then they'd move on to a different era with a different Belmont, and then it was like third season, we're continuing Trevor's story, and it's like, but it's done. Like, where do you go from here? And I think that's probably part of the problem as well.
And that's the thing. Like the third series was very slow.
Mm-hmm.
It was very paced, but then the last couple of episodes were fantastic. Like they're quite fast paced, but then a lot was happening to the point where there was I think it was the penultimate episode where several insane things were happening simultaneously, and you were just sat there being like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!"
Yeah.
But then the fourth season kind of brought it back to this slow pace, but then it kept going up and down a little bit, so you never knew where you were going with the story, really. So yeah.
Interesting. Well, you've got Dragon's Dogma, at least, to keep you busy.
Absolutely.
Pretty much the same studio. Cool. Keith, what have you been up to the last few weeks since we chatted to you?
Much like the rest of you, I've been, renewing my disdain for the giant ball of flaming gas that powers the planet. Yeah.
I thought you meant the one that powers the government for a second.
He's not so big. That's just bluster. He just puffs himself up with that. He's only half the size. He's like a dog that's just had a bath and then been blown dry. It's all puff. I've also discovered that the Vans that I've been wearing around the house recently, other sneaker brands are available, and the vinyl flooring I've got where I'm doing a lot of my work at the moment is causing me to charge up a massive amount of static electricity to the point that I'm like Thor at the end of Thor Ragnarok. And I'm just literally electrocuting everything that comes within a 5-foot range. which is mildly amusing. And I didn't quite realise that it was the shoes, but it's definitely the shoes. I've experimented with various footwear.
Are you playing Immigrant Song on Spotify on your phone every time you walk around the house?
But I have I do seem to have a thing to be able to be quite statically charged quite easily. It's like I electrocute myself on escalators in Birmingham all the time, or metal railings. It's like, why do I just charge up so much? I don't wear nylon. It's like I'm wearing all natural fibers. I don't know how it happens. But yeah, these Vans, it's like they just supercharge me. It's just electric everywhere. It's incredible. I love it.
This is why I don't wear shoes around the house.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like I've put them on to walk the dog, and then I've kind of like gone, I'm going to have to go outside again at some point, so I'll just leave them on for now. But just the particular flooring where I've got all of my sophisticated electronic equipment is just causing me to charge up, and it's like I better stop doing that.
As long as you don't touch a hard drive or anything while you're in that state.
Yeah, which is a bit difficult because just within range I can see 7 or 8, which is not ideal. But yeah, well, don't do that.
So I'd be just going unlimited power, like Revenge of the Sith for the Emperor.
Have you used your new powers to assert your authority over your domain?
Yes.
Your kids. Don't question me.
Don't. Yeah, fry people. Other than that, I've not done an awful lot of gaming, but for some reason I've been playing. When I do game, I've been playing Rain on Your Parade, which I quite like as an indie game where you play as like a cardboard cutout cloud on strings over a kind of 3D environment. And I was enjoying it. It was fine. It was, it's a quite cute little game that I can just play and just rain on people, which is great for being a British person. And then I got so far through the game, and it presented me with a version of Metal Gear Solid, which I must admit is the best Metal Gear Solid game I've played since the original. It was great, but I was just a cloud. I was like solid cloud. It was amazing. And a couple of levels later, I got to play as if it was an episode of The American Office, which was great as well. And that was just mildly amusing.
Interesting couple of diversions in the middle of
it was just like the last level I was raining on campers, and now I'm sneaking through a level with the codec going off, which I was enjoying quite a lot, which is pretty cool. And then the other big thing I've been doing is I've been catching up with 2000 AD, which is on a kind of a roll at the moment, but particularly down to one writer. Strangely enough, there's a writer called Kenneth Niemand, I hope I've got that right. He's been writing some Dreads, and he introduced a character called Noam Chomsky a while back. He's a character I've absolutely loved, and he's recently had his own solo series. And basically, he's an augmented chimp, but he's a detective for his block, and he's awesome. And now he's got a solo series, which has ended up with him being in space for reasons you'd have to read the comic to find out. And then Kenneth had also written a 2-episode strip for the magazine, which was doubly brilliant because it was drawn by a friend of the show, Ian Richardson. And what I've realised, what I like about Kenneth's writing is he's creating these background characters much like the ones that I used to love in the kind of 70s and 80s that just were at times better than Dredd. So you had people like Max Normal and Big Spartan and Walter the Robot and all the rest of it. And so the characters he's invented for the Mega zine strip and also for Noam Chomsky are just brilliant. And I love these characters. And Noam Chomsky is possibly the best character 2000 AD has had in years.
Well, Dredd's the ultimate straight man, really.
Yeah,
isn't he? Is the ultimate no nonsense, no humour kind of person. So to have a foil, as you said, these side characters, it's a perfect opportunity to bring someone like that.
Yeah, but
rather than just dark and gritty and grimdank all the time.
Yeah, but it's just great. It just reminds me of the kind of stories that I loved in Dredd and 2000 AD when I was a kid. Like, I think very recently I've been saying about how it's just not as wild as it used to be and out there, and it's a little bit kind of staid and a bit kind of safe and a bit kind of like playing to the Sky Atlantic kind of reader viewer, But Kenneth just seems to go, that's not. It's 1979. I'm going to have an augmented chimp that wears a one of those hats with the propellers on the top, and he's going to solve crimes better than Judge Dredd can. And I'm loving it. It's brilliant. I absolutely adore it. But this character he invented, Bob, for the magazine strip is brilliant. And I'm like, and it ends on a kind of a cliffhanger that he's kind of there in the background, and I'm like, yeah, I want more stories with Bob. Basically, I can just read Bob and Noam Chomsky stories till the cows come home. I'm loving them.
Cool. So check out 2018 with Noam Chomsky.
Yeah, Noam Chomsky's got his own solo series at the moment, which is great. And it's but the other brilliant thing about it is that the Noam Chomsky stuff's all been drawn by PJ Holden, who I still can't understand why he isn't an absolute superstar, because I just love his artwork. Because for me, it's that pinnacle of the art that I like. It's it's cartoony, but not cartoony in a way. It's just beautifully drawn, immaculate draftsmanship, and full of character. You know, it's great. I love it. And obviously the Bob stuff was done by Ian, who's a genius as well.
Yeah, I think 2008 is getting a new Regen issue shortly, I think. So.
And we've just had one,
build.
a couple of progs back, so the next one's probably due. They're kind of quarterly. Quarterly's 4, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're quarterly. So the next one's due in a couple of months.
Cool.
How about yourself, Ryan? What have you been up to? What static things what have you been blowing up with static electricity?
I haven't been that static, to be honest. I've been more of a giant slug sitting on a sofa. Mainly due for two things. First is I finally finished watching Man Down, which is the Greg Davies sitcom. Well, is it a sitcom? It feels like an anarchy comedy.
It's a comedy drama.
Yeah, it's a comedy drama. Really worth checking out. It's on Netflix and on All 4. Absolutely superb. Just completely insane. Rasheen Connerty, Michael Wozniak, Rick Mayall, just the entire cast. Mrs. McCluskey plays his mom, if you ever watched Grange Hill back in the day. It's just completely insane, and I really do recommend it if you haven't watched it. But mostly it's been Mass Effect Legendary Edition, because I haven't respelled it properly for the UK audience. And Leigh put a video up for this a while ago looking at the original classic version. But I've been having lots of fun playing through the original Mass Effect, but in shiny 4K edition. So it looks shiny. It looks great. They've fixed a lot of things, even though the inventory's still awful. But it's still got one of the greatest sci-fi RPG game stories of all time. And it's the world building, and it's awesome. If you ever played any of the old BioWare games, like Knights of the Old Republic, it's the similar kind of vein, but their own franchise. And they've also teased Mass Effect 4, I've seen as well now, which is very interesting because it seems like the Andromeda spin-off is dead in the water. But I think BioWare's come out and said Mass Effect 4 is going to pick up both Mass Effect Andromeda and Mass Effect 4 in a new storyline, but have impacts from both.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where that got teased. It was a while ago. I think it was at some point, like... It's probably
I think it was a few months
something
back.
In like last summer, in the just mess of summer game announcements last year, which all kind of meant 3 months of announcements just all blurred together, and you just lost track of everything.
I think it was for N7 Day, because I have
probably around there.
That's Commander Shepard's classification in the game. But November 7th is always like a Mass Effect Community Day where they drop stuff like the Legendary Edition trailer, and they probably dropped Mass Effect 4 there as well. So very interesting. I look forward to seeing how that's going to work. It's really complicated. But other than that, being catching up with the Blacklist, I think it's barreling towards its final few episodes at the moment on Sky Atlantic or Sky One. One of the two. It's on Now TV is how we watch
Sky
it.
One.
Sky One. There we go. But it's fantastic. And James Spader is just absolutely amazing in it, and he steals every single scene that he's in. And the rest of the characters are kind of just there just to make that he has somebody to talk to. James Spader is absolutely fantastic in it. Now, you're watching it from the start, Keith?
I've been watching it for years, yeah. And they kind of pussyfoot around sometimes, and you kind of wish they'd just cut to the chase. But it's great. Not trash telly, but I watch it like I watched Miami CSI, just because its central performance is so commanding, and like whatever nonsense is going on around him, James Spader just sells it, and he's ace.
Yeah. It always feels like a bit like it could be a comic book to me, the way the show is, because some of the stuff that happens is so outlandish.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect it to happen in real life, but it just works.
It's kind of funny as well, because quite a few episodes are directed by Andrew McCarthy, who's another one of those kind of like brat packer geezers. Which is, you just think this is just kind of amusing. This is James Spader being directed by the geezer from whatever it is, 16 Candles or Pretty in Pink or whatever, whichever movie Andrew McCarthy's in. I was going to say Mannequin, but that's not his best film. But that was the only kind of one I could definitely remember he's in.
No, yeah. I mean, I urge you to check it out if you do like that kind of spy. I wouldn't say it's a drama. Is it a drama? It has lots of moments. It has thriller, drama, quite a lot of comedy. More from James Spader's excellent performance.
Yeah, and lots of people being shot.
Yeah, and that too. If that
or tortured, or loads of different things. Yeah, it's great. It's good. It's good fun. And the Martian Manhunter's in it as well.
Yes.
Which is kind of good. And the other good thing is, if you watch it from the beginning, you can. There's a character called Wrestler, who has got the greatest driving skills of all time. So, if you're watching this on video, you'll see. I'm going to demonstrate Wrestler's driving when he does it. He's got better over the years. I think somebody's told him, but he used to drive with such a way that like the background would be clearly going down a straight road. And obviously acting, they were having to look at each other. But he'd drive by wobbling his hands from side to side, so you could see that he was in a car. But you'd think you're going to run off the road at any point, because you're not looking at the road, you're talking to Liz in the seat next to you. But also you're driving by wiggling the wheel from left to right constantly. And it used to bug the heck out of me. But he's got better.
It has been interesting to watch Megan Boone's acting skills actually start to develop over the last few seasons as well. Who plays Liz, who's like the other central character. To be fair, she's a bit wooden for the first 4 seasons.
The best episodes she's been in are the ones where she's not there, and it's somebody standing in for her, and you're only seeing her from the back. Those are the best episodes she's been in. She's not the most convincing, but then you're up against James Spader, so I don't think it's fair to criticise.
Yeah. Well, talking of mannequins, it kind of comes full circle, doesn't it? So, coming up on today's show, anyway, we'll be talking all things E3 with Leigh leading the piece on that. Lots of game announcements and trailers and stuff that Leigh has unfortunately had to sit through multiple hours with. And we'll also be talking the first episode of Loki on Disney Plus as well now. But we'll be back shortly.
What's happening to you these days? Having lots of fun? Believe me, I know some folks that are in for some fun. Take a minute. See what's in it.
But you can see how dangerous this could be.
But first, we're going to have a little fun tonight, folks.
It's time for the Geeky Brummie Podcast.
So after a gap of a year, the Electronics Entertainment Expo, aka E3, has returned. It had been cancelled last year due to COVID and the pandemic. It's been an online-only event this year, and we've had lots and lots of stuff from Microsoft, Nintendo, Capcom, Ubisoft, Take-Two Interactive, Warner Brothers, Square Enix, Gearbox, Bandai Namco, Verizon, Xseed Games, Sega. It's just more names than possible to list. And we also had Jeff Keighley's little spin-off.
Yeah, there was the Summer Games Fest, which kicked off on the 10th. So it was the Thursday before E3. But as far as I'm concerned, that was the beginning of E3. Considering if you go onto the Summer Games Fest website, he was claiming like the Xbox E3 showcase was part of the Summer Games Fest. It's like, well, all right, well, you're part of E3 now. If you're going to do that, fair's fair.
Because he dropped that in last year because there was no E3. So Jeff Keighley, in his infinite wisdom of how can I shield some more Mountain Dew and Doritos over the gap, launched his Summer Games Fest.
No, it's Chinese mobile games he's pushing now.
As if Chinese mobile games is produced, and bands from the 90s and early 2000s.
But yeah, well, in fact, that's kind of where we can probably start with all of this, because it was really the kickoff of E3 was Summer Games Fest with Jeff Keighley, which was, like you said, it was last year brought in as a replacement for E3, but was basically ended up being everyone did a bunch of shows across 3 months, and it was impossible to keep track of, and it was all over the place, and sometimes those shows would just overlap. And it was horrible, and that's why I'm glad E3 is back this year, just to condense it all into one weekend. But yes, they did the hour and a half to 2 hours. I can't remember exactly, but it was kind of a lot of different announcements. Not a lot of super interesting stuff, because they spent a lot of time just with a lot of filler. They spent a very long time talking about Call of Duty DLC, a very long time talking about, like, just showing off, like, here's some character models from Overwatch 2. We haven't got anything else to show you from Overwatch 2. Just here's a couple of character models that we've done. They had Ryan Reynolds show off a film that he's in. That was a waste of time, because it looks like the cringiest thing in the world, because it's about gaming, but, like, it's clearly been made by people who don't play video games. They've just seen, like, oh, video games are popular, let's make a movie about it.
Is that the same film we did a while ago where he, like, plays an NPC?
Yes, I think it's the one that's been delayed, like, constantly. And
it's called Free Guy.
Yeah. But there were a couple of, like, big announcements in there that sort of are worth looking at. So Borderlands is getting a very interesting spin-off, because that was the thing that they led with, which is Tiny Tina's Wonderlands.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff about this, and it's following that same kind of ridiculously over-the-top humour. Yeah. But I've heard it's got fantastic voice cast they've got for this, and it's like a medievalish version of Borderlands.
Yeah, so basically, I don't play Borderlands, but I do know that there's like a DLC for, I think, Borderlands 2, which is like characters in a D&D setting. So the character of Tiny Tina is like the DM for this setting, but you actually play in their D&D game, and it's narrated by the characters and stuff. And apparently the developers really enjoyed making that so much they decided we're just going to make that a whole game. And that's what this game is, which is why it's Tiny Tina's Wonderland specifically. And in the trailer we saw, like, there was like dragons and things like that, but there's still apparently guns, but they're probably magical guns, I would assume.
I'm sure there was a shotgun I saw at the very start of that trailer.
But it's kind of interesting because, like you said, there's a very interesting cast, because they got Andy Samberg in there. Ashley Birch is playing Tiny Tina again. I can't remember some of the other names that were listed, but because I just saw Andy Samberg and was just like, huh. And I in my just while trying to react, I was trying to think of Lonely Island lyrics at that point, and I just ignored the remaining names that came up until Ashley Birch showed up. But like, I've never played Borderlands. I've never kind of been into that sort of. I think like the humor kind of just bounces off me, and it's like a big central thing with it. It's like in the trailer for Borderlands, you see the butt stallion unicorn show up, and I'm just like, oh yeah, funny, okay.
It's I've played all the Borderlands and with friends, and it is that, like, it is very much all about the humour. But so obviously Tiny Tina is a big character in Borderlands 3, and just she was by far one of the most standout sort of characters, and the quests she got you to do were just incredibly fun. And I think I'm really looking forward to it, because it's obviously the Borderlands formula is kind of there, but the fact they've actually kind of branching out into this, and they're really sort of leaning into her character, because she kind of gave a lot of sort of freshness to the formula, if that makes sense, in Borderlands 3. So really looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. It is definitely an interesting idea. I probably will never play it, but I appreciate what they're doing with it. So
I've just checked; it's got Will Arnett and Wanda Sykes in it as well. So it's a game for the W's.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a good starting cast, definitely.
And then, like, they cut to Hideo Kojima, and just Jeff Keighley had a nice little chat with Hideo Kojima about And I love that. I love that whole exchange because it started with him going, "So how's it going in Japan?" And Kojima was just like, "There's a state of emergency, Jeff. No one's been vaccinated yet, Jeff." The sort of like you could feel like the sort of vibe of just like, look, just because you're in California where everyone can get a vaccination right now, maybe don't be this cheerful about the guy in Japan. But
I'm just waiting to see what comes out of Hideo Kojima's twisted mind about this pandemic, because he's got to be thinking of his next weird game.
Death Stranding was already kind of about it. If you're going to look at it, it was already predicting it. Just this world where no one can go outside because it's too dangerous and everyone has to rely on delivery drivers. That's basically all Death Stranding is. And at the time, it was like, oh, that seems like a far-fetched idea. And then a month or two after playing it, I was like, oh, wait, no, this is reality now. But then they showed like the weirdest trailer for what is Death Stranding Director's Cut, which I think is basically just a PS5 version of the game that hopefully will remove things, not add things.
Is that Death Stranding? Please buy this game. We spent so much in it from Sony.
But like the trailer was so weird because it was Norman Reedus in Metal Gear, and I don't know what they were doing with that trailer. So like you sort of, he's like standing on this like walkway above this warehouse type thing. And the way that the boxes and things are arranged is very much a Metal Gear level. And there's guards there patrolling around. Like he looks over at a vent and there's a rat running into the vent, just like there was in like the original Metal Gear, to indicate you can crawl in there. And then like he climbs into a box and then gets back out the box and puts the box back on the shelf. And that's the trailer.
It was so weird, wasn't it? Because like the way the box falls on the floor, so it's the traditional. Because I was expecting him to go under the box like it would have been.
Yeah.
But then the whole thing of like silently just gets in the box, sits there for a minute like a weird cat, and then gets out, and it's like, what? Why is this? This bears no relation to anything. Maybe
the fetus is Naked Snake, and it's all just been attached to it. It's all been a Metal Gear Solid record.
Death Stranding is the extended trailer, the extended playable trailer.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if you tried to tie those two franchises together. Even though Konami are probably like, no, that's how
Konami won't let him.
Yeah.
So yeah, like there was a lot of like sort of filler stuff then. But towards the end of the show, they did show off the first bit of gameplay for the Evil Dead game that they've got, and it's basically just Dead by Daylight with extra steps. Because like you've got like characters from the Evil Dead franchise, although everyone's obviously going to want to play Ash, but there are plenty of other characters you can play. I'm not familiar with the Evil Dead franchise, so I don't recognize anyone but Ash. So, but then you've got like obviously another player can play like a demon or something. But then there's also zombies that are just in the level, and you can actually fight, unlike in Dead by Daylight. And it really is like they just took that central concept and went, but what if there was more action in it, and you were just constantly killing zombies in it? It's a weird one.
Sounds a very interesting concept.
Yeah, I'd be more interested if it was continuing the story that was set up in the Ash versus Evil Dead TV series. Because that ends with a massive cliffhanger that we know now is never going to be resolved, because they're not going to come back to that series. So I would have liked the game to have perhaps took us into that, because it ends in a similar fashion to Army of Darkness, with Ash in the future in a kind of post-apocalyptic Mad Max type environment, and where this game just seems to be, it's a bit random. It doesn't even look like Fistful of Boomstick. In terms of there, it's okay. You've got a couple of the characters from the Ash versus Evil Dead thing, and I mean anything with Bruce Campbell in, it's like I'm a sucker for that man. It's like what the hell.
It feels very much like we wanted to make Dead by Daylight, but we need to have enough distinction, so we'll just slap an existing IP over the top.
Yeah, but if it's voiced by Bruce and you can play as Ash and you're just going around shooting things with a shotgun and cutting them in half with a chainsaw, I'm probably in.
It is definitely Bruce Campbell, like, because he actually narrated the trailer. So
yeah, but as long as he plays himself throughout the whole game, then that'll be all right.
It is a bit disappointing though, because obviously that's what a lot of the comments were saying, oh, it would have been great if it carried on from the Ash vs. the Evil Dead sort of series, but also like it's kind of annoying because the game does look quite pretty, and it would be nice to have a proper Evil Dead game where it's kind of, over the shoulder, kind of Evil Within type gameplay, but it's got the humour of Evil Dead. I think there is a market for that, whereas doing the whole, 1 versus 4 is just kind of been done to death. I mean, when I watched it, it looked quite a lot like what was bundled in with Resident Evil 3. Mm-hmm. Same kind of thing where you play the AI director, against
a bit like Left 4 Dead.
Yeah, so I just disappointed. But the game might be amazing. Who knows?
It would be good if there was a game mechanic where you could just avoid fighting. But part of it would be, as Ash Williams, you just go, no, I'm not doing this. I'm going to the pub and I'm going to get wrecked. And now you could just avoid the whole game. Just go, no, until the Deadites come and get me, I'm not putting up with this anymore. I don't want to be the savior of humanity. That would be fine. You could spend half the game avoiding conflict.
But yeah, the big announcement of Summer Games Fest though was Elden Ring, which of course is the highly anticipated Dark Souls written by George R.R. Martin game.
So it'll never finish.
Probably. It does have a release date though, so which is more than you can say for any of George R.R. Martin's books right now. But like the thing about this game, like everyone was like clamoring for more information about this, acting like it had been announced like in like 2015 or something. We hadn't heard anything since, but it was 2 years ago. It was the last E3. That was when we got the teaser for it, and then so I don't quite understand. Like I know how much people love Dark Souls and all that, but I just feel like it kind of, the hype around it seemed a bit excessive to me for some reason. But then again, I'm coming from the perspective of someone who has never played a Dark Souls game or anything from FromSoft. So
to me, they're just games where you walk around with a small sword and you hit things with big swords
and
die a lot.
Yeah,
so much.
Oh, it's a bit frustrating because I've played them. I'm terrible at them. I can't play them. But I love their sort of style, like the setting, the whole sort of like world building they do is amazing. I just can't play the games because I'm a baddie, and I'm stubborn as well. I can't be bothered to spend time trying to get good.
Yeah, the closest I've ever played to a Dark Souls is Code Vein, and that's not even FromSoft. So.
Yeah, they should do like a casual mode for people who can't actually spend the time.
Oh, let's not get into this discussion, Ryan, because that sets the internet on fire.
I want to see the angry comments. It's engagement, Leigh. It's engagement. Yeah, so it's one that always looks pretty, but never really appeals to me, and it always looks that grim, dank. Everything's horrible.
Yeah, the only like FromSoft specific game that has sort of appealed to me has been Bloodborne, which is currently sitting on my PS4 hard drive unplayed because I got it for PlayStation Plus, and it's just been there ever since. Just because that's got like the Victorian setting and the Eldritch horror kind of vibes, which I kind of prefer to the dark fantasy stuff of the Dark Souls games. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about the setting of Elden Ring, but I do think a lot of the enemy designs in that trailer were just insane in a really gruesome but excellent way. Like the one guy towards the end who's just got arms coming out of arms, and it's just bizarre. But after Summer Games Fest, we moved into E3 itself, and we had Ubisoft, which was just largely dire. It was mostly like...
I mean, you had Far Cry 6, which is the same as Far Cry 3, and Far Cry 4, and Far Cry 5, and Far Cry New Dawn.
We got to see like Ali G introduce a new DLC for Far Cry 6, even before it's out, where like... you get to sort of experience what it's like to be the villains in Far Cry. And, I mean, Ubisoft understand what it's like to be villains, considering, the fact that they're currently going to be in court over all the sexual abuse allegations that that came out. But,
there was Rainbow Six Extraction as well,
Rainbow Six
which was
Extraction, which was originally announced as Rainbow Six Quarantine, but then something happened that meant they had to change that name. Suddenly it became slightly tasteless to call it Quarantine. But I mean, I don't even know who that's for, to be honest, because it's Rainbow Six, but also aliens. And
isn't it for those people who are getting finally bored of Rainbow Six Siege after it's been out for like 10 years and just played the same 3 maps over and over again?
But it's kind of weird because it's like a tactical military shooter, but it's got all these aliens in it, and I'm just like, if you're looking for like a sci-fi shooter, it's probably not what you're looking for. But if you're looking for a tactical military shooter, you probably don't want to be fighting aliens, and I just don't understand who it's for.
Do you think it's trying to get like the Division crowd and what's that horrible game series where Alien XCOM? So it's kind of like XCOM plus the Division merged together into something pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that got me in all of that is that you're supposed to be going to these places to sort of extract all the aliens and try and reclaim these areas, but there's infrastructure already built in there, like clearly by like the previous teams, and you're just like, okay, what's going on here? I feel like there was a missed opportunity there where you could have actually like set up the infrastructure yourself as part of the gameplay. But it's clearly just already there, and you're like, okay, well, are we sure we're the first team to sort of jump in and do all this? My favourite part about when the developers were talking about it afterwards was just like, it's got all your favourite operators from Siege. I'm just like, oh, was I supposed to recognise who these generic military people were?
But this one's wearing a balaclava, Leigh. It's completely different to the one wearing a hoodie.
This one's got green hair.
Yeah. So now they launched Rocksmith Plus as well, which seems to be ruining Rocksmith, which is basically Rocksmith was kind of one of those weird not a game games that they released back
it was like Guitar Hero, but like you had the buttons on the thing sort of resembled an actual guitar more.
I think you could use a proper actual guitar.
With this new one,
an actual guitar.
There is no peripheral for it. You do have to use an actual guitar, and I think like it hooks up to your phone and it sort of records what you're playing.
Yeah. So I remember having the original Rocksmith on my 360, and it was a USB to 4-inch jack, and then you could plug a proper guitar in, and it was supposed to teach you how to play, and it did for a while, and then I got bored and never went back to it.
Yeah, pretty much. It did look kind of interesting, and there was an interesting selection of music that I noticed, like Weird Al Yankovic's Saga Begins just stood out in the middle of it. I was just like, that's an interesting job.
Yeah, it does seem to be they're ruining it a little bit, because the whole point of the original Rocksmith was you bought the game and that was it, and then you could buy any song packs. Where this seems to be they've taken their Just Dance model,
this is a subscription. This one, so
subscription fee. So you have to pay to have access to anything outside the core song list, which is a bit frustrating.
It's always quite interesting because again with the original Rocksmith, it's that kind of it's a nice idea in principle. You know, you're playing a game, but you're also learning how to do something. But fundamentally, if gamers think they're learning stuff, they automatically don't want to do it. They just want to mash the 5 buttons on the Guitar Hero and just pretend they're a god. They don't want to learn to be a god.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You get a guitar, you learn Smoke on the Water, and that's it for the rest of your life.
Or for the truly lazy 7 Nation Army by the White Stripes.
Or any of Status Quo's back catalogue.
I still remember when someone mocked up a trailer for Guitar Hero Status Quo, and it comes with an attachment. It's basically duct tape that covers up 2 of the buttons because you won't be using them. And also, it's launching on the ZX Spectrum, which still loads faster than the PS3 version.
Definitely.
But yeah, also in the Ubisoft thing, they showed off the new Mario and Rabbids game. The first one, which was an idea that shouldn't have worked but absolutely did. You know, the on paper, a tactical RPG with Mario and Ubisoft's minions was on paper like, this sounds terrible. Why would anyone play this? And then you played it, and it's like, oh no, it's actually a really good tactical RPG. What the hell? So it does look kind of interesting. They're doing with the sequel because they've tied it more with like Super Mario Galaxy and your planet hopping, and naturally there's a rabid Rosalina who they decided is going to be really emo just because of Rosalina's haircut.
I always feel so sorry for Rayman because it was a Rayman game to start off with Rabbids, and he just seems to be completely forgotten, just dumped by Ubisoft in favour of anarchic Rabbids.
Yeah, there needs to be more Rayman because he hasn't been seen for a while. I think the last game was like 2013 or something like that.
Or maybe we'll see him at the court.
I mean, he is all hands.
Yeah. Infinite reach on them as well. Very, very dodgy in an office situation.
Maybe that's why they've kept him quiet for so long. Yeah, like, I do like the look of it, but it's just because it's purely a Ubisoft product, and at the moment I'm just like, I'm not giving them any money right now. And then Ubisoft decided to close their big one more thing, was an Avatar game. You know, because that's a franchise that people still care about.
The big multi-movie franchise, which has still only got one movie in it. That franchise, yeah.
But we are about to get 2 more films in the next year, the next 4, because there are going to be he's filming 4 right now, so we are going to be deluged with Avatar content. But yeah, I want my Fern Gully the game first. Give me that.
Avatar's fascinating.
Well, isn't it?
Avatar's fascinating because it's like, it was this huge success when it came out, and it's left literally no cultural impact. You know, it's no one's like making movies that were like, oh man, I saw Avatar and I was like super inspired by it. It's been 10 years and no one's made a movie inspired by Avatar, and it only comes up in conversation for people to say like, oh man, remember Avatar? Because I really don't. I don't remember anything that happened in that movie.
Do you remember when after Avatar, everything was 3D for a little bit, and then they realised, oh yeah, still a shit concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is they're going to have a problem with is Pandora is now kind of well known for Borderlands. And if you're having a gun game on a planet called Pandora, I can see a lot of people walking out with a copy of Borderlands instead of Avatar from the retailer of choice.
I think it's the confidence in which they said, like, it's the Avatar game you've all been waiting for. I was like, is it?
Was anyone waiting for this?
James Cameron.
That's the audience, James Cameron.
He's a bit bored in his underwater sub, so he wants to have a relief break by playing the Avatar game once down there.
Yeah, the thing is though, from everything I can tell with it, it's basically just Far Cry Pandora edition. Because it's going to be first person, and it's going to be like you're surviving in the wild, and it's like, oh, so it's Far Cry then.
Yeah, it's an open world map game from Ubisoft. We haven't seen any of those for a while.
I think that's why we haven't seen either Rayman or Splinter Cell out of Ubisoft for a while, because you can't retroactively fit the open world structure to either of those franchises. Because it ruins them dramatically.
Yeah. But yeah, so not really a great E3 showing from Ubisoft.
No. I mean, we had some better showings from the platform holders, but we can probably split that into the second half. Yep.
So take a little break there, and then we'll come back with some Loki chat. Spoilers will abound in this segment, but after the events of Avengers Endgame, if you've not watched that yet, while you're listening to this show, because that's pretty much all we've been talking about is Marvel for the last 4 years. But after the events of Avengers Endgame, we have a new Loki on the block. So we have a time variant, and this seems to be the kicking point off of the multiverse of madness going forward in the Marvel universe. But the first episode of first episode of Marvel's Loki, or is it just Loki? One of the two. Marvel Studios is Loki. There you go. That's what I told. Has appeared on Disney Plus, so we thought we'd give you a bit of a review. So it's come from Michael Waldron, who's also wrote the script for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of tie-in, and I think he's being showrunner on this one. So we have Tom Hiddleston back. We have Owen Wilson, who hasn't said wow yet in the first episode, which was a shock for me. And really good supporting cast with...
We're showing TV. Cancel it now.
Yeah, a really strong cast with Tara Strong, Sasha Lane, Sophie Di Martino, Eugene Cordero. Some really good, strong characters coming through. I was left whelmed by the first episode. It felt like it should have done probably a double open, because the first episode was just Basil exposition with Owen Wilson. And like, oh, let's just explain the entire concept of this show, and then have no action in it until the very last 3 seconds.
So it was session 0 of the D&D game that is Loki.
Yeah, pretty much. Keith, your opinions on it?
I was more whelmed than you were, quite obviously. I really liked it, mostly because it was good the way they took the Loki of Avengers and fast forwarded him to the Loki of the first few seconds of Infinity War. With that character development, and Hiddleston so easily inhabits that character that he took him from the kind of pantomime villain that he was when he kind of first appeared in the Marvel universe, and just whizzed him through that development by showing him the future that wasn't his, and it's quite clearly set him up as a very tragic character, because he will not live that life, which is really interesting because of his time variance nature. Is that he's not going to live that life. It was lived by another version of him, and I kind of like the way it's setting up this idea that, in a sense, it's almost going to free him to be something else, a Loki we've not seen before, and a Loki that may be more genuinely the god of mischief, because he wasn't really that mischievous most of the time when we've seen him before. But I liked his character arc in the films, and I think this is a chance for Hiddleston to really hit that depth of character that Loki has exhibited in the comics over a long period of time. He isn't kind of like your typical villain, which again is in a similar way to how Zemo was in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The villains just have a little bit more. These series villains just seem to have a little bit more nuance and depth than the kind of movie villains who are a bit more kind of straight up. But Owen Wilson, I'm a big fan of Owen Wilson from his days when he was doing stuff with Wes Anderson and Shanghai Noon, great movies, both of them, and excellent. Playing up against Steve Coogan in the Night at the Museum trilogies. So yeah, I like it. I mean, they just established it, and then badass characters that take no monkey business from Loki straight away. I mean, that slow motion swack across the face was just brilliant. It's like, yeah, this is happening from us in slow motion, but like you're feeling every second of it. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of those characters, and also they've history that you kind of wonder, are these going to be the similar characters to what they are in the comic stories, or are they going to play a different role? So it's kind of interesting.
I did kind of like the drawer full of Infinity Stones.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, everybody just uses the paperweights around here.
Yeah, they don't work out of their own reality, which I kind of think they'd established elsewhere in the Marvel universe at some point. But yeah, it's different to WandaVision. It's different to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and the 51 minutes or whatever it is that it was zipped along like so quickly. I was like, oh, I got to wait a week, and I like that, having to wait a week. It makes me kind of like go savor it so much more.
And it seems to have picked up that same kind of Ragnarok humor to the show, where it's kind of a lot of physical comedy has slipped its way in the background.
Yeah.
And Hiddleston's great for that. But the one thing that I do really like the concept of, and I think hopefully they'll go with it, is that Loki can change his appearance and stuff like that. And it also allows them to mess around with variants, where we could have Lady Loki, for example, who's been in the comics, and other alternative variants of Loki, and not just restricted to having Tom Hiddleston in the character all the time. And I suppose it allows for them to do a lot of stuff with the multiverse coming up, where they can recast and replace.
Yeah, although the multiverse is not a good place to get to because it's a mess. And we don't want to be doing that because the TVA are going to be very upset if we keep making branches. It's like, it's not good. Unless, of course, you do it because it's supposed to do it, which I thought was the best get out of jail card for the Avengers, where Loki goes, what about the Avengers doing kind of this? No, that was supposed to happen. I was like, brilliant. So as plot-wise, it works if within the logic of your own story, it's supposed to happen. That's like, how do we get out of this idea that we've done time travel? Just write in that was supposed to happen. Brilliant. That's it. That's end of story. We've solved it.
It reminded me a lot of, if you've read Terry Pratchett, The Time Monks and Lao Tzu and that kind of The Thief of Time book. It felt very similar to that kind of thread where you've got what's his face playing the god of time as a kid, and then he gets brought up by a time traveling monk. It felt kind of, this is similar kind of inspiration for the story. And it is one of those stories that's been done to death multiple times with time travel, but I think they're taking a nice bit of a uniqueness with the variant situation on this one.
Yeah, and I like the whole setup of the TVA as well, when they look out the window and there's this other world that we're probably never going to touch on. But yeah, I really enjoyed that first episode.
Yeah, I think Owen Wilson, as I said, is definitely one of the highlights for me. Leigh, I'm assuming you won't have watched it because it has Marvel written above the name.
All right.
Matt, have you been tempted to watch it yet?
I am. It's on my list. So I'm going to start watching it as soon as possible. But I think it's, like I said about WandaVision, I like the sort of more non-conventional Marvel sort of experimental sort of series, that kind of thing. And I think Loki is going to be, I'm going to quite enjoy it. Again, like you guys said, I do enjoy how Tom Hiddleston sort of portrays Loki, and I like how, again, the writing and that kind of thing, they're very self-aware, but they're also leaning into this, like, we are going with this vibe. Because I think one thing that I kind of lost interest with WandaVision was towards the end. I think the last episode especially was very stereotypical Marvel, flying around everywhere, explosions, that kind of thing. But I'm hoping this is going to be a bit more, it's action, but it's less jarring, I guess, than how they've portrayed the rest of the series. So I am really looking forward to it. The only thing is, time travel always confuses me in any form they try. I know, obviously, they're explaining it in certain ways, but to me, time travel just always melts my brain. So
there's a really good bit which reminds me of the cartoon in Jurassic Park of when he first arrives at the TVA, which might help with that situation.
Okay.
And it's one of the nicest bits of the show, I think, and I'm not really spoiling it, but it's a great little 5-minute, like, separate little short. It's slapped in the middle of the thing.
Yeah, and it's the timekeepers. They introduced the concept of the timekeepers, which could potentially nod to other characters further down the line that could cause problems with the Avengers. But I don't think it's too much of a problem with the time travel. Time travel probably isn't quite what it is because it's variants. It's splinters. So it's things that happened that shouldn't. So it won't be time travel per se, so it won't be kind of like going back to things. So it's almost like, in some ways, it reminded me a little bit of Quantum Leap, with Loki being the TVA's Sam Beckett and correcting stuff in a sense. So I wonder if that would work.
you say that, Viv said the portals reminded her very much of Quantum Leap when Ziggy comes.
Yeah.
When they come through.
Opening the door in the lab and going into Sam's.
Yeah.
What's it? Yeah, there was. I think Hiddleston has that sense about him, because what I like about Loki as a character as well is that people think of him as this self-assured, arrogant, person, but he's not. He is a character who is. That's a front, because he's very self-conscious of the fact that he was adopted by Odin, and they kind of rub it in a little bit in this episode where they call him Loki Laufrey, which is his ice
real name,
god's name, rather than Loki Odinson, and it's kind of like it makes him, he's one of those characters that is very uncertain of himself, and it's all front to kind of make him he's doing things and he's like, why am I doing this, why it just comes across in that episode that he's not he's a different character to what we think. I'm looking forward to that journey of how Loki finds his way.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Matt and Keith, with WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier, it's actually going. I think we get a lot of depth, and we're going to get a lot of backstory for characters that have not been as fairly served with the franchise over time. I mean, if you think about Loki, he had some decent screen time in the first Thor movie and the first Avengers movie, but since then he's kind of been more of a backside character a lot. So I think definitely having some information about what he's been up to, etc., and having some character development, even though it's not the Loki that we're used to from the movie side, would really help.
Yeah.
Same with the Falcon, same with the Winter Soldier, where we've had piecemeal bits of their story.
Yeah.
But I think definitely be revisiting it later on and see, after a few more episodes, how it gets on.
Yeah, I think if you've got any love for the Marvel Cinematic Universe and good storytelling, and I know there's a large proportion of the viewing public who like Tom Hiddleston, and he does get his kit off at one point, very briefly. There could be a moment he could freeze frame. I've not done it myself, so I can't comment on the content of that freeze frame. But yeah, I mean, it's a good fun movie. TV series so far. One episode in, there's another one's kind of dropped while we're recording and stuff. But yeah, but I mean, it's an easy sell to me. I've got decades of history with all of these kind of characters, and they've changed over comics time, and I don't really mind that it's a different storytelling thing. As I always say, tell me a good story with good performances, shot well, and I'm on board. It's pretty good.
It's going to be interesting to see how Michael Waldron deals with it over the series, because he's previously worked on, I think he was assistant writer on Community, he's worked with Dan Harmon on Harmon Quest, wrote an episode of Rick and Morty. So is that kind of level of humour going to seep into Loki at some point?
Yeah. He'll just wipe out the entirety of existence and step into another universe altogether. Yeah. Oh, well, I've destroyed that universe. I'm just going to go to another one. That's fine. We'll just bury all the bodies under the patio. Yeah.
Be interested to see how it goes.
Hello and welcome to the portion of the show where I talk about my games of the week. Last week there were 2 games of the week. The first of these was the indie game of the week, which was Chicory, A Colourful Tale. It's a top-down adventure game starring a dog with a magic paintbrush setting out to bring colour to a world in dire need of it. Some of the staff on this game worked on Wondersong, Night in the Woods, and Celeste, so it's already working with an excellent pedigree. Seriously, go play Celeste as well. Chicory looks adorable and promises some fun times with its central painting mechanics, and the soundtrack is almost certainly going to be gorgeous since Lena Raine is behind it. So for all that, it's the Indie Game of the Week. Game of the Week overall last week was Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, or as I know it, the first game that makes me desperately wish I owned a PS5. The Ratchet & Clank series has always been excellent, and this new title looks set to be a return to form after a few weird multiplayer experiments and a remake hampered by the storytelling from the dire movie adaptation. It's promising more ridiculous weaponry across a galaxy that's now going to feel smaller thanks to dimensional rifts that will allow easy hopping between planets. Plus a new playable character named Rivet that's already won people over even before people have seen her in action. And from all accounts it's a visual treat too, and one that shows off what the PS5 can do. Trailers are promising the series aimed to become a playable animated movie is now fully realised. I'm excited to play this, but getting a PS5 isn't easy right now, and that makes me sad. I will instead be jealous of everyone who gets to play this right now. Game of the Week this week is Minute of Islands, a game that saw a surprise release during E3. It's a puzzle platformer set in a magical archipelago. You play as a tinkerer named Mo who sets out on a journey to revive a series of machines that used to belong to ancient giants in an attempt to avoid an incoming calamity. It's got a gorgeous hand-drawn art style and promises an emotional story about what it means to do the right thing, and it just looks incredibly interesting. It's available for PC, PS4, Switch and Xbox One. Those are my games of the week for the past 2 weeks, and now, back to the main show.
So E3 2021 Part 2, Gaming Boogaloo. So we covered off Summer Games Fest and the Ubisoft, soon-to-be court case production gaming studio in the first part. So do you want to give us an update on what else has happened so far?
Well, since we were just talking about Loki, we might as well jump in with the Marvel conference. Sorry, the Square Enix conference. Which was like a third of it was the Guardians of the Galaxy game that they announced. Which because of that and Avengers, that means that both studios who've been developing Tomb Raider are now developing very bland-looking Marvel games. So I might be slightly upset.
And it killed Deus Ex off here, which annoys me even more because they did 2 parts of a trilogy.
Yeah, like in my reactions, I actually acknowledged the Deus Ex fans, being like, "Look, I know that like Deus Ex fans got Deus Ex shoved out so that Tomb Raider could be made by Eidos Montreal, while Crystal Dynamics worked on Avengers, but now Tomb Raider's been shoved out as well. So now I'm in there with you and just being annoyed." Because first of all, like I'm surprised that they're still doing Avengers content because that game did not do well.
I assume they've spent that much on the franchise. The
only way that I think that this is carrying on is that maybe there's some sort of contractual obligation that they have to keep it going for like a year or something. That maybe like Disney have insisted it has to be a year at minimum, because as I understand it, Square Enix would have been in the red solely because of that game last year if it wasn't for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, those two were diametrically opposed in how successful they were. So, and when you think about just how bad you can make a Marvel game sell, like, that shows you just how badly they screwed up the Avengers. Because this is, like, riding off the back of like Endgame and all that, and you'd think it would have been a success, but it hasn't been a success at all. So they decided to follow that on by doing Guardians of the Galaxy, which the only real difference between them, as far as I can tell, is that this one isn't a live service game.
It's a single player, I think, where you only play as Star-Lord,
and I find that
does give us some promise.
But also that
they've actually bothered to write a story,
because it's about a team of characters, but you can only play one of those characters. And there's a lot.
I'm assuming DLC will come at some point where you can unlock them.
But then, like, as a lot of people, I noticed a lot of people were reacting to it, seemingly saying, like, yeah, and it's not only that you can play just one of them, but it's the most boring one of them. Like, you can't play as, like, Rocket or Groot or anything like that, so, you know.
But they had that whole kind of idea of, like, Mass Effect, and your choices throughout the game will change your way of things. And then the demo they did was, like, we're going to put Rocket in the box, and then we're going to change our mind and put Groot in the box.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I get the feeling these are just arbitrary decisions that won't actually impact on the way the game plays out at all.
And that confused me especially because there were people saying, like, oh, it reminds me of Mass Effect. And I'm like, did you play Mass Effect? Like, I know that I haven't finished the first one, but, like, there's nothing in common here.
Yeah. It was just that allusion to it. It's like,
they're both in space. That's about the only thing they have in common.
They've also done that uncanny valley thing of, like, having them very similar
Yeah.
to the MCU versions,
Yeah.
but not at all.
Yeah. It also worried me that in that presentation they dragged out Dan Abnett. And Dan's not a guy for a lot of grandstanding. You know, he's written a lot of great comics over time. He's been responsible for a lot of Warhammer content, and he wrote a very, very good run of Guardians of the Galaxy comics. And I'm going to like, what? I'm not sure why you're dragging him out, because for one, anybody that's already been burned by the Avengers is going to be highly dubious of a second game with the Guardians of the Galaxy. And then you kind of like, you know, I don't know. I just looked at it and went, I'll just watch the films. You know, that's fine. Or read the comics. It's like I can't see what I'm going to get out of the game. That is going to make me think, oh yeah, this is worth the time.
Yeah, I think the rest of the presentation was just purely Life is Strange and Final Fantasy.
So they had a whole bunch of mobile games just clustered together. So there was about 3 different Final Fantasy mobile games. There was another Hitman Sniper mobile game, and I think there was something else. The Life is Strange stuff. See, I do like Life is Strange, and I'm interested in the new one. But the thing is, they'd already done a presentation going into it like a couple of months back, and I don't see. It feels like the only reason it was here is to go, by the way, we're still releasing this in October, you know. And then they also had that. They had the Platinum Babylon's Fall.
The live service.
Yeah, like
game,
that was as soon as they said the words live service, I went, well, bye then. Like, because I was interested because it's Platinum, and Platinum have done a ton of really good games. You know, they've done Bayonetta and they did Metal Gear Rising and stuff like that. So I was like, you know, this would be interesting.
But Leigh, Godfall has gone so successfully. It is the franchise of the future.
I like that with that one they're getting so desperate they're putting it on the PS4 as well now, just to try and get it to sell more. And it's like maybe it was just bad. Maybe that's why it didn't sell. But also at the Square Enix thing, they had the Final Fantasy Origin thing, and it's interesting that they're releasing a PS3 game at this point, because you know that's genuinely how it feels. Because you've got Gruff McBuzzcut as the main character, and then Pinkhead Anime Boy as his sidekick, and they clash so much next to each other, and like it's Koei Tecmo. So it's like the Team Ninja people who also ruined Metroid with their seemingly doing the same thing for Final Fantasy 1. And just most of it is just Gruff McBuzzcut like headbutting wolves and going, die already! And it's like, that's I checked, like this wasn't Final Fantasy.
But if you think about that trailer, it was really jarring. It was like really soft, like classical music, and he's just there being like, "I'm here to kill chaos," and you just like, I don't. But like
I'm not. I'm really not sure how he feels about chaos though, because I don't think that trailer was clear enough.
I sort of think like, just imagine about a networking event like, "Hi, I'm Jeff. I work in IT. What about you?" "I'm here to kill chaos."
See, chaos is expecting us.
"It's not a dream. It's a hunger to kill chaos." And you're like, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's such a weird choice. Like, I think it's going to be like DMC Devil May Cry, in that it's going to be just embarrassing and yet weirdly fun to play. But it's just embarrassing in every other aspect. The storytelling is going to be bad, and the aesthetic's going to be just like edgy late 2000s.
And after they release it, they will gently put it to the side, never to be mentioned again, and then just carry on the franchise.
Get a completely different Final Fantasy prologue, like 5 years later, that will pretend that one never happened.
Yeah, because they're doing remastering 1 to 6 again as well.
Yeah, but I've a horrible feeling that because they're not doing it as a collection. And I have a horrible feeling that some of them are going to be the mobile versions, which have like really killed the art styles of things like 6. So
yeah,
because they didn't show anything, and my immediate question is: it going to be the real versions or the mobile versions? And that's the real thing. So yeah, Square Enix just not very good. Honestly, the best part of it was Matt Mercer trying his best to hold it all together and try and sound enthusiastic. But at least, you know, with E3, we did have the 2 platform holders who bothered showing up because PlayStation weren't there. but Xbox and Nintendo both put on really, really good shows. Xbox did the exact thing that I wish that all publishers would do, which is they just went trailer. Hopefully there's something in here that you like. We're just going to bombard you with everything, and hopefully you're going to like something in this. And there definitely was stuff to like in there. There were at least 2 Fallout in Space games getting announced.
So there's Outer Worlds 2 is definitely one of those.
Outer Worlds 2 and the Starfield, which is the new Bethesda, the actual studios. I can never remember the full title of the development studio. But it's Bethesda's kind of follow-up.
Yeah. Is it Bethesda Softworks or something stupid?
I think that's like what the publisher was called until it kind of has folded into Microsoft now. So now it's all the Xbox game studios, but I mean,
Starfield I'm very excited for because it will be a fantastically buggy mess, but in space this time. It's like, how many more years can we eke out of the creation engine? Come on, one more game. The
thing that fascinated me though about was like people who were really disappointed that they didn't talk about Elder Scrolls 6, and it's like they have been on record to say that they're working on Starfield first, and once that's done, then you get Elder Scrolls 6. But I mean, it's a bit hard to tell what to think of Starfield because it was just a CGI teaser. But then so was Outer Worlds 2 as well, although that one was a lot more fun.
I've watched that one, and that was more amusing because it was like, yes, it's an alpha, and we have no footage. Yeah. So here's a trailer with no footage.
I really enjoyed that trailer. It was just like, and now we pan over this dramatic landscape, and now everything's moving in slow motion so that it'll really get those pre-orders going. And here's the main character in silhouette because we haven't actually designed them yet. We can't show you any gameplay, but we do have a title.
I mean, I am looking forward to Forza Horizon 5 as well. That looks like it's a really good...
Yeah, I mean, I've been meaning to play Horizon 4 because obviously it's on Game Pass, and I just like the idea of just being able to just book it around the UK, just like crazy. And this is basically more of that, but it's in Mexico this time. And as I...
So it'll be the UK, but with the yellow filter over the top of it.
But also, like, with the Forza games, they're just beautiful. Like, they're just, even if you don't like driving, you can just sit there and just like love it.
There was legitimately a part in the demonstration of it where, like, the guy showing it off from Playground just went, "Have a look at this geology," and he just showed you some rocks. And like my immediate reaction was just like, "Oh yeah, look at that geology." But they also showed like a volcano, and I hope you can drive into it because just ramp it into the volcano. But
it is good fun, Forza Horizon 4, to just drive through the Cotswolds in Ken Block's car and just destroy.
And they did make a point as well in the demo to kind of show off that you can just stop in front of bits of scenery and you earn like points just for looking at scenery.
It's also quite. I was going to say it's also quite nice as well that it's not next gen as well, that it will still be available for current generation machines as well, which is kind of nice. That they're not pushing, because that's a big title that they could have used to lever people to
I think
move.
I've feeling they might be doing that with Motorsport from the preview that was given for that one, but I think that one's still a while off.
I think they're struggling because they know not enough consoles are in people's hands at the minute, so they're hedging their bets on this generation.
Yeah.
But I did see the trailer for Battlefield 2042, and as somebody who played Battlefield 2 back in the days when I was actually young, it seems to have recaptured that ridiculousness feeling of the first
as someone who
Battlefield game.
Normally will zone out completely when a military shooter shows up. That one actually genuinely caught my attention because it was like the grappling hooks and the ridiculous like tornado sandstorm going on, and like there's a bit where someone drives a jeep into a helicopter, just drives off a building straight into the helicopter. I was like, what is happening?
That's kind of like the fun stuff that happened in Battlefield 2 back in the day. It was that kind of ridiculous level of slap some C4 on the front of a rickshaw and like fire it at a tank.
I kind of just appreciate that because normally when these types of things get shown off, it's like, we're all working together as a squad, and you're like, oh yeah, go over there, and it's all very serious. And then you actually play the multiplayer of these games, and it's nothing like that. So seeing a trailer that genuinely feels like this is kind of what it's actually like to play that. except with few, still with not enough like teabagging 13-year-olds.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's not enough 14-year-olds going in the background of the soundtrack over the voice chat.
Or someone playing like bad music from their phone.
But it was a glorious trailer because it did. I think I felt the same when I saw that trailer, and I went, "Oh, I'm in for this now." having not played kind of the last couple of Battlefield games, but just watching it as it got progressively madder and madder, and you were just like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just down for this."
It was even bits like when they get into the lift and it just slows down completely as they're just waiting for the lift. I was just like, "That's a fun moment. Thanks for putting that in the trailer."
Yeah, I think they've done very well with this one, considering it's been like the also-ran franchise to the Call of Duty megalith that we keep getting, which is boring as hell. And now they've even taken away the single player because nobody cares about it anymore. So everybody just plays whatever the latest version of Modern Warfare is.
But also, on a similar note of like shooters with multiplayer, Halo Infinite got shown a bit more, but interestingly, like even though it's coming at end of the year, we still didn't get like an actual gameplay demo. Still very CGI, and that's still a bit concerning.
I think the last time they did a gameplay demo, everybody hated it that much they went, "Okay, we're not going to give you any more now."
Yeah, it was mostly just Master Chief talking to an AI that isn't Cortana, and then like some very CGI multiplayer stuff.
I mean, Halo's made by the soundtrack, and that's all they need to do is put some stirring music on the back of Master Chief floating through space with dead people around him, and there you go, there's a Halo trailer.
Yeah. But I've never really played a Halo game, so I can't really comment on any of it. But
I must say the Master Chief Collection, which is on Game Pass, is a fantastic deal for what you get.
I've been playing through it, and it is fantastic. It just shows how much fun I used to have with Halo. I haven't really played anything after 3 for quite a while, but I think going back to the whole Halo Infinite thing, I do find it quite weird because again, it's one of those kind of games where you know what the multiplayer is going to be like. They're not spicing it up much. Like it's going to be exactly what you expect it to be. So I think it was a bit weird, like you said, Leigh, to just kind of like show the multiplayer without the actual gameplay of the actual game. Because again, you're just there being like, we know what it's going to be like. Just looked prettier.
I wouldn't mind if they didn't show us anything and just went, "Yeah, the game's out tomorrow." Fill your boots. There you go.
Halo would still sell, so you know.
Yeah, it's sell like gangbusters.
Yeah. The other thing is with Halo is the storyline usually has a massive, big opening gambit scene, which is probably a massive spoiler, which is probably why they're keeping it a little bit quiet.
I mean, the one thing I will say with Halo, which I find, as obviously graphics get better, the alien weaponry looks more and more ridiculous. Because you'll have like a really well detailed assault rifle and then a super soaker. And it worked in the sort of like original trilogy when graphics were still, when that was the art style they were going for, but now it just looks weird.
It's like, we brought these weapons from Splatoon.
I mean, they've still got the big hammer. I'm happy. That's the best weapon in the game.
Hopefully Griffball comes back, because that was brilliant.
But also at Xbox's final game that they showed off was a new game from Arcane, which is not actually the next game coming from Arcane because that's going to be a PlayStation exclusive due to how the contracts worked before they bought Bethesda. But I don't know what this game's going to be like, but I'm definitely interested. So it's kind of like Left 4 Dead, but with vampires.
It did look. That trailer did look pretty good.
It's very stylish.
I kind of like this.
The character designs were really cool, and the powers looked really cool. But I'm like, how does this work as an actual game? Because I'm loving this trailer, but I need to know more.
Well, I've already decided which character I want to play as. I mean,
2021 seems to be the year of vampires. There seems to be a lot more vampire content.
Well, I mean,
through.
half of that is just Paradox, like, abusing their World of Darkness license, but, you know.
Yeah. I mean, the other one I was going to quickly mention is Stalker 2, because it's been in development for 12 years, I think, by GSC Game World. I mean, if you ever played the Stalker games, they were pretty much the Metro games before Metro games existed. It's all like post-apocalyptic Russia, but it's one that I'm quite interested in seeing, because the original games are ridiculously hard, and well, they're going to keep continuing with that kind of thing, or is it going to be another Cyberpunk 2077? I'm hoping it's going to be a good one.
I will say that with the Xbox conference, the two games that really caught my attention, and the first two games in all of E3 that got me genuinely excited. Psychonauts 2 has a release date, and I'm I've been waiting years for Psychonauts 2. Like, the first game is hilarious and it's brilliant, and more of that, please. And this just looks like more of that, but bigger and prettier. But the humor still looks like it's all there, and I'm looking forward to that last week of August now, just because that's when that's out. And the other one that really caught my attention was Plague Tale Requiem, which is the sequel to A Plague Tale Innocence, and I did not expect them to be doing a sequel to that, but they're doing one. It was still like very much a CGI teaser, but sort of looks like it could take the story to some very interesting places. So I'm looking forward to that one, especially because of having recently replayed Innocence. So
I will say one of the other highlights for me was the idea of a Top Gun Maverick add-on to Microsoft Flight Simulator. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get that game now because it'll be on Game Pass. I'm like, oh yeah.
If it doesn't come with Kenny Loggins and Danger Zone, there is no point for that.
I'm just like, how are you adding Top Gun to that game? Which is basically like, we're going to fly to New York. It's going to take us 14 hours. And it's like, how do you add Top Gun in?
And then you get some guy just zooming straight past in an F-22.
So the thing
it's going to fly upside down above your cockpit.
The thing you got to remember about that is it's based on the new Top Gun film more than anything else. So.
Yeah. Top Gun geriatric here.
But there are a couple of like really cool little indie games also shown in the Xbox thing as well. So there was Somerville, which is basically inside with an alien invasion. That looked really cool. There was Replaced, which had like just an amazing looking pixel art style, like super detailed pixel art. I'm just like, how long did this take to make? Because having like dabbled in pixel art stuff in the past, like I know how long this stuff takes, and that just is so detailed. But the setting just looks really cool as well. And also, I'm glad to see that 12 Minutes has a release date as well, which is the time loop game. So it's like a guy, like it's got like a man and his wife getting like the police breaking into their apartment and arresting them for like a murder they don't know anything about or something like that, and it's just a loop of 12 minutes and he has to try and figure out what's going on each time with that time loop going. And that's out in, I can't remember when that's out, but it's out in the next couple of months, I think. I've been looking forward to that. So it was definitely a really good showing from Xbox. Just like really something for everyone in there. So,
and the amount of games they've
Sorry. I was going to say that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids game, like Grounded, coming from Obsidian as well, looks really fun, which is like a 4-player co-op where you're shrunk to the size of an ant.
Yeah, but the whole idea is that they push that whole a very high percentage of those games were Game Pass, day one Game Pass releases, and that was, I think, where Xbox was like, yep. You can, if you're on Game Pass Ultimate, you can play all of these games straight away. And I just thought they were very strong on that idea of their infrastructure and how they were going to get these games to people. And I think that as impressive as the presentation was, just that idea of like, yep, this is Game Pass day one, you can play it. I thought it was good.
I've heard rumours they're getting another significantly sized studio at some point. in Microsoft's continuing acquisitions. So might hear a bit more about that in the near future as well.
Yeah, see that annoys me though, just because it is like building a monopoly.
Look, you've had PlayStation Monopoly for years.
No,
It's
like,
time for you to have it on the other foot.
No. Like, it's actually like the thing with Microsoft's acquisitions is they will buy up studios that have nothing to do with Microsoft. And when they bought Bethesda, when people were cheering that, I was like, this is bad, because this is a major publisher that they bought. And if they do that with all the other major publishers, then you're left with like 3 platform holders and nothing else, and that's not good. Like, people need to remember that, is that like this could get to a point where like Microsoft suddenly own like 75% of the games industry, and then they jack up the Game Pass prices, and there's nothing else you can do about it. So that's why people need to be a bit more wary of stuff like this, I think.
I think they're trying to go for that Nintendo model, because Nintendo has so many strong first and second party titles, whereas Xbox has really only had Halo as their one strong title.
That's what Nintendo are waiting for. They're waiting for that moment, and then they'll release the Switch Pro. Like, this all come to us now.
Now, it's funny you talk about Nintendo, because that was the other good show, was their Direct, which kicked off quite strong, because they announced that the next Smash Bros. Character is Kazuya Mishima from Tekken, which I'm totally on board with, because Tekken is like the only traditional fighting game that I've really played.
He's the most boring character of Tekken series.
No, but he is he's kind of one of the main characters. That's kind of why. I think it would
have been better.
What, Hayachi?
I would have gone with Heihachi, just because I think he's kind of more of the face of it. People kind of recognize him a bit better, but I think just because they already put a Mii costume of him in there, that they probably just went with someone else.
I mean, my personal choice would be Panda, or maybe King. Panda's awesome, or King would have been perfect, because it's a leopard-headed Spanish wrestler.
King, driving Mario or Kirby or something, that'd be quite good for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nobody wants Eddie Guardo, because he's the cheapest character in any fighting game ever.
No, I was going to say he was the one that I'd have picked. Come on.
Because he's cheap, Keith. No. He's a cheap character.
I think Morang's cheaper.
Oh,
spam kicks. But I think the ultimate troll would have been if they announced like Gon was their character choice.
He's not even really a Tekken character.
Could you imagine Gon versus Yoshi?
I can't believe Ryan dissing Eddie, man.
He's a cheap character, Keith. We've all known it since Tekken Tag Tournament.
But as well,
all he does is sit on the floor and spin round, so he can't get close. He's the Blanca of the Tekken universe.
So this was the thing, though, with all the Tekken stuff being announced, though, is my immediate reaction was, think of the music selection we're going to be getting, because the Tekken soundtrack is excellent. Yeah. And also just trying to think of, like, who some of the spirit fights would be. Like, King has to be one of them, because Smash Brothers already has a cat-based wrestler in it. It's Incineroar. They can just use Incineroar to represent King. But so like I'm very excited for that one, and the trailer was great just because it had Kazuya throwing everyone off a cliff into a volcano. And I love that everyone online had the same reaction to him carrying Kirby to the edge of just like, no, not him, leave him alone.
I mean, I'm assuming they're going to have his demon as his ultimate.
They've definitely shown off some devil stuff going on. And it looks like it's going to be part of his final Smash, but I think it might also be part of his moveset somehow.
Yeah, because they have got Angel as well, so they could flip between, I suppose, if they were.
I think what they're trying to do with it is like maybe there's going to be like a meter that builds up, pretty similar to how like Joker's persona comes out after a certain period of time. So wouldn't be surprised if they do that with Kazuya. But yeah, Nintendo also kind of had a generally good show after that. A lot of good stuff coming to the Switch. A lot of which is like still a lot of ports coming and everything, but there's a few like big titles in there as well. Metroid Dread got announced, and I'm very excited about this as someone who's been
Metroid. Metroid Prime again.
It's not Metroid Prime 4 though. This is a new 2D Metroid.
Yeah.
So like, and I think like they're doing this one largely to tide people over while Metroid Prime 4 is still in development. But like, I don't care. It's a Metroid game. It's a proper Metroid game, and it's not being made by Team Ninja. It's not a Federation force. It's just a good kind of classic 2D Metroid game. I think it's following on from Fusion, from what people are saying.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Apparently, this one's been sort of hinted at for years. Well, this clearly has passed me by in all that time, but apparently it got cancelled twice, and this is the third attempt, and it's finally getting an actual release. So
I did like the Eddie character and the fact they're doing a double pack amiibo set for him. I'm kind of looking at that going, do I get that on pre-order? That's quite tasty.
Yeah, my reaction to that was, don't tempt me, Nintendo. I've got enough of it.
It's great that 2 franchises from my childhood are back as well. In Super Monkey Ball, which is one of the greatest party games ever
From
made.
what I gathered, that's basically like a collection of all of the Super Monkey Ball games, which is pretty great.
Yeah, it looks amazing. And the other one is Advance Wars coming back after a long hiatus.
The funny thing is about that one is like the day before the Nintendo Direct, I'd read a comment because I just was reading this thing on, I think it was on Reddit or something, just people like saying what they'd like to see in the Direct, and there was one guy in there going, I'm the clown who's been waiting 12 years for more Advance Wars news. I know it's never going to happen, but I'm still waiting. And then as soon as that came up, I thought of that random guy on the internet. It was just like, I bet he's happy.
I mean, cutesy Annihilation is always fun, and that's the joy of Advance Wars. It was like a super serious storyline with cutesy graphics.
But
it's a really good puzzler game, and it's really strong.
Yeah, I was genuinely surprised to see that come back, because I know that there's like a devoted fan base that have been devoid of any new games in that series for a while. So,
but it's Nintendo know their system, because when you're looking at a game again like the Metroid Dread and Advance Wars, when you're thinking about the Switch as a handheld device, they're perfect games for that platform, and I think that's Nintendo's strength, is they go, we know exactly what games people are going to absolutely go for on our system, and these are 2 of them. And yeah, I think Advance Wars is brilliant because I played that on the Game Boy and DS, I think. GBA. Yeah. And then they even got the crazy
it's not
one
hard
that they had
to
on the
figure out
Wii.
what system the Advance Wars series was on, because it's in the
Game Boy
name.
Advance. I should know. There's a copy of it in one of the rooms downstairs that we've still got. Yeah, but great games, and I kind of like, double pack, as long as you're not charging $60 for it.
I'm getting more annoyed though that I have to buy a Game & Watch because it's got Link's Awakening, which is the best the Zelda game on it. It's like it's forcing me to have to buy a Game & Watch, which I will never have. But it's got Link's Awakening
Make sure on the release date you're just sitting on a store's website and you order it as soon as possible, because that thing is going to sell out.
Yeah.
I love that Game & Watch.
Link's Awakening.
It's got like the first. Well, I was going to say the first 3 Zelda games, but it doesn't have a Link to the Past. But it's the first 4, but without a Link to the Past. And then they decided we're going to do Vermin, the old Game & Watch game.
Yeah.
We're going to put Link in it, and I'm like, why? Why are you doing that? I don't understand.
So I'm sure they could have made enough space to get Link to the Past on there as well,
instead of Vermin.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I mean, quite a bit of Zelda stuff. I loved how they kind of tried to bait and switch people at the end. So just like, we got one more thing to show you, and it was DLC for Age of Calamity. It's just like, you're not going to end on this, Nintendo. That would be like
I mean, we are getting Breath of the Wild 2 at some eventual decade.
Yeah, that was the big thing that everyone was waiting for, was the Breath of the Wild 2 announcement, which is out next year. A lot of weird stuff going on in that trailer, like sky cities and stuff going on, and Link phasing through bits of the world and reversing time and all sorts of stuff going on in there. There's also like a weird bit of reversed audio in that trailer, and I did reverse it, and it doesn't make much more sense forwards, so I don't know what's going on there. But as someone who never really got into Breath of the Wild, so I'm not super excited, but I understand why a lot of people are.
Mm-hmm. There was some news from the PC gaming stuff. I know you don't really look at that too much, Lee. But Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is coming to Stadia. I mean, it's your favourite game of the last few years on a platform which you desire so much. So I just thought I'd let you know, just in case that was tempting you into the Stadia world. And I think it was the only thing announced for Stadia, but it's coming to Stadia.
I do know that, like, I think Stadia is like 2 exclusives. Have now been released on everything else. So, you know, there's a perfect reason to buy Stadia right there.
Mm-hmm.
I did.
Is there any indie highlights?
I mean, in terms of like, there was a lot of stuff. Like with the Wholesome Direct was a really nice time because that was just like lots of really cute games, kind of just thrown at your face one after the other, like 30 seconds at a time, and it's just like there's a lot of really nice stuff in there, but it's hard to pick out a lot of highlights because there was so much, and you don't really get a lot of time to register like things before the next game comes in. But there's quite a lot of nice little stuff in there, and just, you know, very. If you want to like manage a cat cafe or something, chances are there's a game for you out there. But yeah, like, I mean, honestly, the best stuff coming out of E3 came from the platform holders, and it came from the indie stuff. Everyone else just, I don't know what they were playing at, honestly.
Yeah. Publishers never seem to do well at these kind of events where it's kind of like, look at all the variety of diverse games we have, and then shows the same game with 6 different skins. Ubisoft, sorry.
The thing is, though, like, it's not even like fun E3, like, you know, the days of 2006 and that kind of thing, like the mid-noughties E3s, where they were just incredibly awkward and cringy. It was
There's this giant
enemy crab.
Yeah. Or
Ridge Racer.
Connected Ventures. You know, that kind of, it's just bland, and I think that's kind of the worst bit. Like if they were quite meme worthy, then fine, but they're not really.
I think that's part of the problem of it being all online only because they can like pre-package it all, and you don't have the live stage show where everything goes wrong. Because then, like, when
the last one we had was Keanu Reeves for the Cyberpunk.
So you wouldn't have a moment like that where someone in the audience just yells, "You're breathtaking" at Keanu Reeves. But you also don't get moments like when, like, that one time where Sony went to show off Uncharted 4 and the controller just didn't connect. At least you knew it was a real gameplay demo. Just awkward silence as Nathan Drake just stood there.
Ubisoft flag with the cutscenes just breaking down and just dying, the whole thing just dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least you didn't have to suffer through another Uncharted movie trailer, Lee. I'm sure that'll be coming in Sony's little side thing. Are they doing one this year?
I mean, Jeff Keighley sort of hinted that there's going to be a state of play soon, because when they talked about Death Stranding Director's Cut, he did say something like, "We'll find out more about that in a few weeks' time," or something. I was just like, okay, did you just spoil that Sony are going to be doing a thing?
Doing one of their just drops.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, look, stuff. Yeah.
But I mean, hopefully something good will come out of that, because it did feel like the lack of PlayStation was definitely felt, because I feel like that would have also been a strong show that a bunch of all these weird free floating announcements could have been shoved into, and it would have been a bit better paced as well, just to have that. But so I think that's kind of been the problem with this year, is everyone's been trying to get their own part of the stage, and no one seemed to know what to do with it, because you had like Deep Silver just announcing they had a new publishing arm, and basically just sitting around for an hour and not really showing anything. They showed us a bit of key art for Payday 3, which was also seen at Summer Games Fest anyway, so that was no point of that. Capcom just came on and said, like, we're doing Resident Evil DLC. We can't show you Resident Evil DLC, but we're doing it. And then Namco like booked like a slot just to show more Dark Pictures anthology stuff, and it's like, okay. But you've got a lot of franchises.
They've done so well with those anthology games. It's like, yeah.
One thing about Capcom, though, which I think is useful to note, is obviously they're talking about part of their sort of slot was talking about sort of Capcom Pro Tour, which is obviously their sort of like esports arm for Street Fighter. And Capcom they've been big in sort of like esports for a long time, but it's interesting because they're trying to get more into esports, and you can see that with weirdly they're trying to push Resident Evil franchise into esports with ReVerse, and they tried with Umbrella Corps, that kind of thing. So I just thought the actual announcement itself, the fact they used E3 for that was interesting, but also just their characteristics over the past years. They're really trying really hard to become a big player in esports, but they're just going about it in a really bizarre way.
Yeah, I mean, I know that obviously Street Fighter's massive and everything, but like, I can't really see some of their other franchises taking off in the same way. Like, I think Street Fighter's got that benefit of having that longevity anyway, because fighting game tournaments have been around forever, so it has that benefit. But like you said, trying to force Resident Evil into it is just weird.
Yeah. And it's just, I just find it a really interesting angle because, like you said, they've got one franchise which works really well in esports, but then they're trying really hard to get into that space, but they're not making any effort to kind of make new IP which would, cater for that. They're just focusing purely on, let's see what else in the cupboard can we throw towards like esports, So,
I mean, they've got a lot of franchises from back in the day which they could bring out and reuse. It just seems to be a bit of a waste that they only concentrate on Resident Evil, because Capcom have been around for a long time, and I'm sure there's enough stuff in the cupboard that they could rumble something.
Like, you'd think that, if they're trying to really push esports, they could bring back Darkstalkers and Rival Schools or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like 100%, especially Rival Schools, because even now it has a massive cult following. So it's just a really bizarre move.
Even something like Fatal Fury or one of those games, they could easily probably swap them up into something of a more modern style.
Well, or
Garou, Mark of the Wolves.
That's SNK though. That's not Capcom. Unless they want to do another Capcom versus SNK, in which
Yeah. I mean, Capcom versus SNK versus Marvel
versus Tatsunoko. Yeah.
Yeah, that just there we go.
Mix all the verses together.
Well, I would be on board.
Their version of Smash Brothers Ultimate for that.
Capcom versus everybody, I would be fully on board for.
I'd even just be happy with a Capcom versus Capcom. They've got enough franchises to make it work,
Yeah. But, I mean, that's definite. I loved back in the day with like Capcom versus Marvel, and that were always some of the strongest games that I thought they had. And now they just seem to be milking Street Fighter and Resident Evil until the teats are dry and not much else.
Or Mega Man releases.
I don't know. Yeah. Or maybe they're like Konami and they're just making more pachinko machines nowadays.
But I wonder whether the Capcom thing is, because for me, Capcom is married to the arcade. That's where the Capcom games came from. In terms, and pretty much all of the games that they do were started off as arcade machines. So I don't know whether the decline of arcade machines is just, they don't know where to go and compete with all the other studios that aren't arcade makers first and foremost. It's just weird that Capcom for me is like an arcade, but in a similar way to like Atari or
and also like some of the big creative names that came out of Capcom, like the sort of names that stand out most of all are like Shinji Mikami and Hideki Kamiya, who now work for completely different companies. Mikami now works for Bethesda, and Kamiya is obviously the guy behind Platinum and everything. So it's like,
I mean, they did say about another Ace Attorney game. And that was, I think it's been a Japanese only spin-off franchise they've had.
I think it's a compilation of two games that have just been Japan only releases for the longest time. So
they are definitely a company where they kind of accidentally do well and don't really know why. Because I think the Village announcement is a perfect example where they're going, the DLC is coming, but you can tell they weren't really planning it because they weren't really sure whether Village was going to work or not. Even though obviously Resident Evil 7 was a great success and they were building momentum with RE2, which was another sellout, that kind of thing. They just
and you know
don't
they
seem
they,
to...
they made all that promotional material with the character that made everyone horny on the internet. Did they not think that would be successful?
It's moved on now, Lee. It's the new Samsung Galaxy
Oh, I know.
S21 mascot, I believe, is the current bay of the internet.
But for that moment, on the when the game's released,
it was a 7-foot vampire lady. Yes.
They need to get
by
conventions
Smoothie.
going pretty soon because those body pillows are gonna go a bundle, like the 8-foot body pillows that everybody's gonna want.
All I'm just thinking is a Futurama crossover with Death by Snoo Snoo at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was E3. Just a bit messy in places, well for the most part, and then just Xbox and Nintendo just really showing everyone else how it's done. Really, I guess. So
I mean, next big one is TGS, I think, or is that already?
probably I don't know when that's happening, but I know that EA have got a separate thing going on, and PlayStation will inevitably have something soon. So we'll probably see little shows like that pop up over the next few months.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, let's hope conventions and things like that can restart again soon, so we can go and play those Cheeto encrusted controllers that they have.
I was quite happy that the two big showings were from the two systems I've actually got access to. So I was like, yeah, this is good. But also as well, quite shocked at the lack of next gen stuff. Really, I mean, we are a good few months into that generation now, and it didn't seem to be. Didn't seem to be that push to move everybody to the next.
I honestly feel like that generation has launched too early.
Yeah.
Because the games don't seem to have caught up to it. So
I think there's probably a raft of games that they're not talking about on purpose because they're waiting for enough adoption to get in place before launching. So I can imagine a lot of release schedules have probably been pushed back, hence why we're getting more remastered and Game of the Year editions and look, some DLC that we don't have to build too much.
What's the board of Sony are going? Why didn't we build more than 5 PS5s? Why did we start with such a low number? What was that all about?
Yeah.
You said it's like I'm imagining like a Sony version of Spinal Tap, where somebody's written the numbers down, and the board, the guys in charge of Sony have said make 500,000 PS5s ready for launch, and somebody's written 500,000. Right, that's what it is. It's a million. They've got. So why have we only got?
It's the other way around, Keith. I want a console this big, and they've gone to it and they said, make the console 6 foot.
It's probably that.
Console,
producing any more than 5 will probably just sink Japan. They'll just go.
Sorry, Sony. I don't mean to disrespect.
The other big E3 news, we almost missed out on it, was Microsoft are releasing a mini fridge.
Oh, yes.
Which looks exactly the same as the Series X.
That
So you can have a mini fridge queued up with your Series X.
That was great, because the moment that I was doing my kind of wind down, my opinions on the Xbox thing, I was recording all that, and then the fridge showed up, and I went, I'm sorry, what? I just completely lost my train of thought just as that showed up. My favourite part as well is just in that trailer they showed, yes, this is really happening.
I think it's been a meme for that long. It's kind of like...
I mean, fair play.
We'll take advantage.
Fair play for them to lean into that so hard. They're just going, yeah, all right, here, have a mini fridge.
I mean, Sony missed out on that with the PlayStation 3 because they could have had that George Foreman grill franchise tied up.
Well, I mean, with the PS5, it needs to be one of those standing fans now, or a router.
Yeah.
They just need a Seto Kaiba head to stick on top as like an add-on. That'd be brilliant.
Or a Sauron eye.
Sony kind of partner with EE to launch the PS5 EE router. Get 5G in your house plus all the latest PlayStation games. That'd be the way to go.
Yeah, I'm surprised nobody has modded it with the Eye of Sauron yet, to be honest.
Yeah. So that was E3.
Thanks very much for the roundup, Lee. Thanks for joining us on the Geeky Brummie Podcast this week. Hope you found it entertaining. Lee, where can we find you online?
You can find me on YouTube at BobThePetFerret, where I do various different gaming videos. You can find my edited highlights of reactions to E3 currently, as well as a video about Ratchet and Clank, celebrating the history of all that. Can also support the channel on Patreon at BobThePetFerret as well. You can get updates on Twitter at BobThePetFerret, and I have a personal Twitter at TheCheapFerret as well.
Keith, where can we find you online?
Occasionally posting photographs on Instagram under the @HardLookHotel, no underscore on my Instagram. And then on Twitter, basically typing rants in, but then not posting them at @HardLook_Hotel. But then just kind of mostly retweeting the content that I'm putting out through the Geeky Brummie Twitter feed. So I'm retweeting myself. There's some kind of bizarre thing happening there that will eventually cause the end of the world as we know it. But that's fine.
It's like Bruce Willis in Looper.
Yeah, my future self will come back and tell me, stop, don't tweet that message. Okay, that's the one.
Matt, where can we find you online?
If you like my sunburnt complexion, you can see my selfies at Matchstick Matt at Matchstick_Matt on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter at Mr. Matt Lovell, and I also take over the Geeky Brummie Twitter on Mondays.
And Shanice couldn't unfortunately join us today, but you can find her on Instagram at IdleCreek101, and I think that's her Etsy shop as well, if you want to go and buy some of her lovely artwork. And you can find me at Ryan Parrish on Twitter when I remember to log in, which doesn't happen very often. You can find me at Brummie Gourmand when there's food stuff for me to take the pee out of, which also hasn't happened at the minute. So you can mainly find me at Geeky Brummie on a Tuesday, and hopefully, as the time of this podcast comes out, you'll be getting my inaugural technology post this Tuesday, which I'm going to be rounding up the freshest tech news on a Tuesday on the Twitter feed as well. Thank you for all enjoying us. As usual, can you please like, subscribe, share the YouTube briefing? The buttons are down here somewhere. You know which ones we mean. But don't forget to check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all at geekybrummie.com. On YouTube at youtube.com/Geeky Brummie if you're listening to the podcast, or you can check the podcast out if you're watching on YouTube. Many ways to engage with that content.
You could look at the screen whilst playing the video, whilst listening to us on headphones. I mean, you might have some problems syncing it all up, but let us know how you get on. Did it make sense if we were slightly out of sync? Mick, have you thought that I was Ryan and Leigh was me because the voices were coming out of different places? Experiment.
But also, if you mute the video and play Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon in its entirety,
Is this where we came in? Or alternatively, you can tell me about how not wrong I am that Link's Awakening is the best of all Legend of Zelda games. And please engage in the comments below and tell me why I'm wrong.
It's Majora's Mask, that's why you're wrong.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.